Hello and welcome to Gold Patch Notes Rundown, the patch notes analysis for League of Legends for gold players by a gold player. I am your host and guide Smalls Fry, and this week we are going through the patch 10.1 notes. So this is the first patch of the season. It actually came out a couple days ago, and this is my third attempt at recording it. I've been having some hardware issues, and a couple other things came up, but we should be able to go through this. I'm going to try to skim through pretty quickly, and I'm actually not planning on reviewing any champions I'm not really familiar with. Plus, I'll be going over some Sylas changes and talking about a few other things that made that controversial. But first thing to note... Oh, okay, so they've already mentioned some balance changes, so we'll have to jump back to there. I'm going to jump to season start. Here we go. So the season does begin tomorrow. I am recording this on Thursday, January 9th. So there are less than 12 hours before this starts out. So that's something to keep in mind. Next, going into champions, Set is being released. He looks like a fun champion, looks fairly balanced. He's basically an immobile version of Vi, but he has true damage and another unstoppable ult, stuff like that. He doesn't look too bad, but I'll have to see how he is once he's out on the Rift. Aphelios, and we'll look at his mid-patch update in a second. His ultimate has been a major problem in that he can press R onto a 5-man group of enemies and come out with a pentakill, 1v5. So they are reducing the AoE damage when it hits secondary targets. So basically, it hits the first target, does damage and spreads out and deals damage to them, and it hits those secondary targets and spreads out from them. And so I'm fairly certain that what this means is the AoE damage starting from the secondary targets is only 75% of the main damage. I'm going to jump back to this. Splash attack bug fix. So it was a bug fix for his auto attacks with Infernum. Awesome. So we're going to jump back here. Aurelion Soul, looking at this, it's a minor change to his wave clear early. I don't expect this to affect gold elo, so that's all I'm going to say. Azir, minor buff here in just a little bit of damage, but it's not a scaling increase, so you're not going to see him 1v5 change a fight quite as hard. I like this because it's a utility change without changing his damage too much or changing how the ability works. It's just the wall stays up longer, so he has more area control and he can shut off an area for longer. I'm not sure how long a Nivea wall lasts, but I think it's more than 3 seconds, so this might be bringing it in line with an ultimate level ability. Next, Corki, more poke and wave clear with his ult. His ult is really underwhelming. I usually call his package his ultimate because, honestly, that is a more impactful ability, and it comes up at a standard ultimate duration versus this, which reloads pretty quickly. Okay, this is one of the changes that I definitely wanted to talk about, though. Jax's R now is affected by Ginsu's Rage Blade, which means it does get that double on-hit proc, which, honestly, I think is excellent. Basically, the problem that I have with some effects in the game is that they're inconsistent. It's kind of like why Akali's Shroud, after the rework, was really, really unpopular, because it broke a pattern in that you go under tower and you can see somebody who is invisible and they can't use that to their advantage. So similar thing, but to a lesser degree. Basically, they are making on-hit effects more consistent by giving Jax's ultimate passive the bonus damage, or double proc from Ginsu's Rage Blade. It's a buff to him, but I like it simply because it's because of consistency. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some number tuning that follows up after it. Jace, I don't really play Jace. I'm not sure exactly how this plays into him. I think you max Q first, so that's going to be something to note, is that he gets 25 more damage at max rank. But again, that's max rank at 6 points. Remember, his ultimate has 1 point constantly, and he puts 6 points into his Q, W, and E. Next, Kalista. I don't really know her very well. I know that she has more mechanical problems than anything, so stat buffs like this, even though she gains 187 health and 8.5 armor over the course of the game. It's not enough to bring her back, in my opinion. And I think the Kalista mains subreddit and other communication channels probably have a better idea of how to rework her. Similar to how the Skarner mains have constant conversations about reworking him, Kalista mains, you guys probably have plenty of feedback on what Kalista needs. Next, Kassadin. That doesn't matter. These two I'm going to talk about together, actually. So this is a quality of life change. It's not really a buff or a nerf. But it makes the champion easier to play. So when you use your ultimate, it does scale up both the mana cost and the damage. In Kassadin's case, it doubles it every time. In Kog'Maw's case, it stacks additively, so it's the original value plus a certain amount. So it just means that you can more easily glance at the ability and see when that ability will be back to its original cost and damage values. Honestly, an excellent change that I am very glad to see Riot making, just for the sake of clarity. Okay, next, Mordekaiser. So, of the two changes, this is the one I think is more impactful. It's the one I care about more. One, because I think a lot of people forget that he even gets the movement speed, and this is a good reminder. But two, plus 9% means you just can't escape him. And three, that's Skarner's job right here, right? He attacks, in this case, it's his passive, which procs when he deals damage to an enemy champion, and so he gains this movement speed so he can keep running after them. The problem is that was Skarner's original champion identity, as this juggernaut who would, he could get to you, or if he could get to you, I mean, he would stick to you really well. He originally did that with slows, and then after that they switched him to the Crystal Venom, where his Q would give him stacking movement speed and attack speed. And in my opinion, this is something that I would more likely see on Skarner, who doesn't really have good hard engage, right? Mordekaiser has his E, that claw that pulls you in. Skarner has to run at you, right? His hard CC is melee range. He does have, even though if he hits that slow, he has to catch you still, and if you can hard CC him, then he can't do that. So, just me micro-ranting a bit about how this, I think, I disagree with it being on Mordekaiser. I really want that on Skarner. I want something similar on Skarner where he's not reliant on Spires. Okay, end rant. Nami, this is just a change, so her E now also adds extra damage and a slow to abilities, not just auto attacks. So this just gives Nami more opportunities to use her E other than on auto attack based champions, specifically marksmen, and for using it as a speed buff. I don't know if I would really want to call it a buff or a nerf, but I do think it's a net benefit in that she has more options. Okay, Jawani. Couple changes that I'm really happy to see here. First of all, she gains 85 health over the course of the game. That's not much, but it's something. This I care more about. Really, this is the big buff. This buff barely matters at all. You don't take your E for the base damage, you take it for the proc damage, which is like 10, 15, 20% max HP. Actually, I think they may have nerfed that. I'd have to check. Anyway, but this, going from 35% to 50% of her bonus resistances, is very big, especially since Jawani tends to build something like Gargoyle Stoneplate, and you usually see her building, really stacking a lot of armor, a lot of MR. She is a tank. So, seeing these really makes me happy, seeing these buffs. It makes her better against burst comps. She's still not good against poke comps because you can just proc her passive and it's gone. But this change I am very excited to see. She's been weak in the meta for a while, and I'm really hoping this brings her back up a little bit so that she becomes playable. I'm probably going to be using her for some of my ranked games this season. Anyway, this, again, I think isn't nearly as impactful. It's a bit of a placebo buff to her E because I'm fairly certain you max W then Q, and E is last. You mainly take E for the stun proc. Stun proc and the passive damage proc that you get. Anyway, Shyvana gets a couple of changes. So this is more of a consistency thing as well as this, right? So now it's every dragon gives her +5 armor and MR. And then this one, her ultimate is weird. It doesn't have a cooldown. If you're dead, it doesn't tick up, right? You do have to be alive to build Fury, and you get it through auto attacks anyway. So, increasing Fury gains, I assume that's over time and from attacking. I would have to double check that in game. Honestly, I really like this change just because it's good consistency, and I think it fits with Shyvana. This one I also like because these are both changes that mostly affect on hit AD Shyvana. And so here we go. Right, so that's the extra damage you get after you mark a target with your E, you auto them, and you deal the extra damage. And then they increase the cap on monsters, so her clear is also affected a little bit with her E. So her E, really good changes in general. They affect that on-hit style that I really prefer, so I'm really glad to see them emphasizing that, and I'd like to see a return to that playstyle instead of one-shot AP Shyvana. Okay, so after Shyvana we have Sylas. These are some pretty major changes, actually. So first, he has some stat buffs. Of the stat buffs, I should say some nerfs to base values and buffs to scalings. What this means is, doing the math, he minus 60, my bad, almost said minus 40, and then plus 20 per level, 17 to, okay, so he gains 280 health at level 18. Armor, let's see, he gains 12 armor at level 18, and then 1/2 and minus 7, so this one he gains, yeah, this one he gains like 1.5 MR. Not much. Okay. So, honestly, I'm okay with the stat changes. Just remember that he is going to have an extra ruby crystal or 2 of health at level 18. He's going to be a bit tankier, a little bit more bruiserish. Now that does go back against, so passive, first of all, they're increasing the AP ratio on this, but decreasing the AoE range. He gets some bonus attack speed, which they're actually affecting in the mid-patch updates, so I'll look at that in a second. It stacks 3 times, so if he uses 3 abilities, he has 3 attacks where he has extra attack speed. And then, I guess, this execute probably has to happen after the initial AoE damage, because otherwise the initial AoE damage, I think, is higher than 25 anyway. So I'm going to jump back up here. So first looking at his passive, so they're increasing the base, or is that just AD? Yeah, they're increasing the AD ratio on it, and increasing the attack speed he gets while he has a stack available. So instead of 60%, it is 80%. So this just means some stuff like his turret pushing power is really good because he can use his abilities to clear the wave and then auto the tower 3 times, and he gets 3 attacks where he does 30% more damage with just if he has no AP, plus 25% of his AP, as well as 80% attack speed for those auto attacks. So that's something to keep in mind. His turret pushing power is much better. Next, his Q, so they increase the cooldown a little bit. They nerf the AP ratio and the damage from just the first part of the chains. So not when they cross, not the explosion after that, but just the first part of it. The detonation, though, gets a lot more damage, right? So his wave clear is improved just from the base damage alone, as well as the AP ratio is much higher. You know, it goes from 60% to 80%. That is 1/3 higher AP. But the damage reduction on minions has been increased from 45% to 60%. So that kind of negates that extra damage he gets. So it's really just he gets a bunch of extra damage against champions and not so much against minions. Also, they removed the slow, and they made it so that he cannot combo it with his E as much. This is a controversial change because it means that mechanically he is much simpler and he has less outplay potential. A lot of people don't like this, and I would be I wouldn't be surprised if they change this or revert this. What I think they will revert is this getting removed. I think his W really does make sense as an auto attack reset. So I would like to see that come back, even though I don't like seeing abilities have extra features. Thematically, it just makes sense to me. Next, though, the AP ratio goes up to 0.85, which is pretty good. The cooldown goes down a lot, especially late. And then cooldown goes down. It doesn't have that kind of execute that it used to have, plus 50% damage if you're below basically 50% health. 40% is not a very low number. So that honestly procs a lot faster than I was expecting. I would have expected a nerf to this number first, make that lower, put it closer to like 25 or 20%, but we'll see. The healing now has a kind of linear scaling, but the cost also shot up a lot. It basically doubled at level 1, and it tripled at rank 5. So, even though it has a lower cooldown, it's a 4.8 second cooldown with 40% CDR. Now, granted, we can't count on that anymore, but anyway. That right there keeps you from being able to spam it, and it means you do have to use it a little bit more judiciously unless you have more mana built into your kit. Definitely not something that you'll see people using for wave clear. You'll definitely see it being used for dueling, especially after an engage. Out of all the changes, this is what I want to see get come back. Because to me, it removes a lot of his burst. And yes, he has higher AP ratios, so he has plenty of burst if he builds a lot of AP. But I think the basic attack resets really did chain well with his passive, which kind of makes sense. Talking about basic attack resets, also I'm just going to jump at this. They got rid of one on his ult that I didn't even know was there. Personally, out of all of them, this one makes the most sense to get rid of. Get rid of the ult, basic attack reset, keep the others. Anyway, going back, so this is one that I think they probably could have kept and I would have been fine with, especially since they got rid of his shield. He doesn't have a magic damage shield, which thematically kind of makes sense for him to have one. Maybe they'll give him something else to replace it and keep him in theme. Because right now, really all he has for that anti-mage, magic-stealing champion theme is his ultimate. However, moving on to what they have done to buff the ability, the AP ratio is a little high. Honestly, I expect to see that nerfed, especially if they give him his attack resets back. What I'd like to see is give those back, reduce this to like 0.7, maybe 0.8, right? Let's see, the cooldown goes down, or it now scales, where it didn't at all. And then there's a lockout, and I'm not entirely certain how the lockout works. I think he can't move during that, or something like that. So I'm not sure how that mechanic works. I can't really pass judgment on it. I am going to jump back up here, though. So his Q, they actually increased the detonation damage even more. So it's not really affected by the minion damage reduction. That 280 value is definitely going to be enough that it mitigates that 60%. It's higher damage to minions than it was previously. And then the cooldown on his W, they dropped it by a second at all ranks. So it's still not spammable, but 7 seconds means it's now a 4.2 second cooldown with 40% CDR. Okay. You can kind of hear my chicken sizzling in the background, maybe. Okay. Last 3 champions real quick, though. We have Varus. So his Q cooldown goes down by 2 seconds, and the refund he gets from proccing his blight stacks also goes down by 1 second. This is a net gain of 1 second for Varus mains, and and it does mean that maxing Q for a poke-oriented playstyle, he can throw out a Q every 6 seconds. That's not too bad. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know how many people actually took advantage of the Blight cooldown refund. I know people would try to proc Blight stacks anyway, but I feel like you do that more for the damage than for the refund alone. So we'll see. I don't expect this to affect him as much as this. I really hope to see Varus come back to bot lane as a little bit more dominant of a carry. Vi, here is a change that I was expecting. Her ult is now unstoppable for the entire duration of her uppercut. So it used to be that when she reached her target after that unstoppable portion, you could stun her or knock her back or basically get her away from the target, which would cause some weird interactions. So personally, I am really glad to see this because it feels better and it just seems more consistent. Actually, yeah, making it work more consistently. So this is the 3rd or 4th champion that has consistency changes, which is one of the reasons why I really like this patch. Now, last, Zyra's slow on her E's, or on her plants grown from her E, has changed a bit. So the base slow is reduced, but if she has 2 plants grown with her grasping roots, which is that root that she throws forward, those will be able to stack the slow, but she needs at least 2 plants in order to stack that. Or stacking up to 2 times, so maybe she can stack it 3 times, which would be very interesting. And I assume that multiplies, not adds. So it's not going to become a 75% slow. It's going to become a... I'm not going to do the math, but I think it's going to come out to be about a 40 to 50% slow. So that's something to keep in mind. And then... So yeah, I don't expect that to change Zyra too much. It does mean that if you use your E with multiple plants, you get more of a benefit than what most people do, which is use their seeds with their Q. Okay, next, support items. I'm just going to rush through these real quick. The items that have the relic stacks now get health regen. Those are the tankier items that give more health and lower offensive stats. And they did reduce the offensive stats on those to make up for the health regen that they get, so they're not just overloaded with stats. But I really think those needed the health regen because those are mainly used on champions that can't poke as well, and they're more likely to get poked out of lane. So the health regen really helps, especially so that they can go up and take a stack and actually level up the item eventually. Next, the items with the Spell Thief's passive, I guess, those get mana regen, because these are often used by champions that have an ability that they can poke with, but if you're constantly poking and harassing, you're going to run out of mana very quickly. So the extra mana helps those champions just as much as the health regen helps your tankier champions. Plus, just keep in mind, the health and AP, or health and offensive stats of these both went down to make up for the extra mana regen. Again, to keep them from just being free stat balls. Next, Conqueror. It gets a little tooltip so that when you look at it, you can see how much healing you've done. Oh, goodness. Why did I do that? Let's go back. Did not mean to click on that image. Omnistone also gets a buff early, so that now when you proc that keystone that you just got, you can get a new one much quicker and return to the fight much quicker. I still don't think this makes it a viable rune. Don't think that makes it a good option, but I do think that it helps out with people who take that. Next, the only bug fix I really care about talking about is the Ardent Sensor change. So, ever since patch 9.14, if you have a self-shield, Ardent Sensor would give you the bonus attack speed and on-hit damage that it would normally give if you're using a shield on someone else. So they made a change somewhere along the line. It only worked on self-shields, and it did not work on self-heals. So that means the main 3 champions that could use it effectively, I guess you probably could have seen it on Nautilus, but he wasn't one of the three I was going to talk about. But Skarner, Udyr, and Diana, all three of which are very auto attack based champions, and all three of which can benefit from AP. Because let's face it, Nautilus, although he benefits from AP, he's mainly played as a support right now. I would love to see a return of jungle and top lane Nautilus, but that's another discussion. Anyway, going back to Ardent Censer, though, Udyr and Skarner were really the only two who built it. Diana had better options. She could go more of an assassin build, but Diana got reworked just a patch or two ago, and suddenly Ardent Censer became a core item on Diana builds, and it caught Riot's attention. In fact, people were making Reddit posts about it, saying why you take it, why it's good. And it basically ruined the item for both Skarner and Udyr, both of which are lower player-based champions who struggle in the current meta, and they're less played. And so it's frustrating to me to see something like this kind of get ruined by a player base that picks up on it and immediately popularizes it. Was it abusing a bug? Probably. Was it a major difference? Not to most people. I think it made a difference to especially top lane Skarner and Udyr players, because you could get something like 3,000 gold worth of stats if used properly for only 2,200. But honestly, just this bug fix frustrates me, not just for the bug fix itself, but also for the concept behind it. Okay, and last, they've come up with some new skins. So the Mecha Kingdoms, which look very similar to, they remind me of like Pacific Rim, that kind of Gundam style. I really like the look of the Leona skin. Very, very heavy Pacific Rim vibe. This one's just, it's yellow. And all of them have something in the background, so you can at least see the scale of these guys. Honestly, this looks a lot like Mecha Aatrox, thinking about it. I'll have to look to see. Okay. And then Freljord Sylas. This one looks really good, and it looks very similar to the Silas in the cinematic that they released today, the Warriors cinematic. So if you haven't seen it, I would heavily advise go look at it. Even if you don't play League much or care about it, that is an excellent video, and it shows why Riot's marketing team is better than their gameplay teams. Anyway, looking at these, given that there are 8 chromas here, I would not be surprised if one of these becomes the special giveaway chroma. I want to glance at that one. Yeah, it looks like set. Looks like mostly like Jax just because of the staff, but those wings might give trouble. Draven, looks like Draven. And I can't really say set looks like anyone else in particular. So, okay, that is the end of the patch. I tried to go through it quickly, and I kind of got hung up on Silas. Wait, was there one more thing? Oh, Thresh got some VFX changes. I remember reading about those. Those are something that you'll have to go online, go on and see them for yourself, because I can't really describe those. Anyway, don't know what that was about. Alright, so that's the end of the patch notes. Season begins tomorrow, so I wish you all good luck. I would say I will see you out on the Rift, but Monster Hunter Iceborne came out today for PC, so I'll be playing that instead. So in lieu of seeing you out in the Rift, I wish you all a good hunt.